Hello, I'm here today with Mike Rohde, who is one of my big heroes who brought me onto the path of sketchnoting quite some years ago. Like I didn't know anything about it. I knew I did something around these lines, but I didn't really know it was a thing. And then I read your book or so your videos, I don't remember. And I thought, oh, wow, I have to investigate here. Nice that you're here. Thank you.
It's so good to be here, Ingrid. Thanks for having me.
And we will draw while we talk. I share my screen. I'm here in Adobe Illustrator, not
Oh, there we go.
because that's my favorite. I mean, I've lived in Illustrator for many years.
Same for me. I learned it back in Illustrator 1.0, Ingrid. Back when
Oh,
it first released, I was one of the first early users. So I kind of think in vectors, which you would understand, right?
I skipped the first Illustrator versions. I was working in freehand, it was called.
Oh, that was right. There was a big battle between freehand and
Yes,
many freehand users were angry when
yes,
Adobe
that
bought
was
it and
me.
killed it.
That's
Yeah.
me, and I'm still angry. Still angry. And I also like to draw on the iPad, but this here is hardwired to my computer, so
Sure, sure.
that's what I'm using. So this
Okay.
is my template. What
Nice.
I want to do is draw the hero's journey of your customers.
Okay.
You're going to talk a little more about that.
Okay.
So the whole thing is influenced by Donald Miller's story brand, and
Oh yeah, I know Donald Miller. Yeah.
you are the guide who
I'm
is so
the Yoda. The Yoda.
the Yoda, right? So it's always a little bit scary if I'm drawing for somebody
Oh,
who's
this is
better at
great.
drawing than me. But I mean,
I love your style. This is great.
oh, and now we have the here that looks too sad. You don't look sad. Okay, that that must be good enough. That's
There we go.
something that I learned with this whole sketchnoting movement. It's not about art. It's just has to be good enough.
It's about ideas. Yeah. Like I
Yeah.
think something I can say about this, which is sort of the foundation and the way I think about the people who understand and like sketchnoting or discover it, is that a lot of people have a bad relationship with drawing from maybe when they were little kids. I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of it happened in grade school for many
Mm-hmm.
people. I feel like I'm really fortunate in that I somehow managed to escape through all my schooling, like still being able to draw and being excited about it, and that people liked me drawing for them. Like somehow I convinced them that it was really valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And even my teachers allowed me to do it. I must have found a way to like fit it in and not get knocked on the head about how sketchnoting or sketching should be, like a problem. So that I feel like I'm fortunate, but a lot of people don't have that experience. And one of the things that I want to wake up in them is that, hey, you don't have to be an amazing artist to do this work. You just need to be able to communicate ideas, and that's good enough. And the big thing that I tell them is, because our brains are such good pattern recognizing machines, you don't have to draw amazing stuff for us to interpret. Like our brain will fill in the gaps. So that's really helpful. And I think, one of my goals in all this is this idea that if I can convince you that drawing is just about ideas, it reduces the pressure and the fear that I have to make something beautiful, right? This concern about art is like, well, art is beautiful and I have to draw exactly the way things are in reality. And if I don't do that, it's no good, right? That all that stuff gets pushed to the side, and the requirements drop when it's just ideas, because then you can do it with the skills that you have. Obviously, everybody would love to draw better. I would love to draw better. There's things that I'm not the greatest at drawing. But in the meantime, you can draw well enough, especially if you're talking or if you have the ability to write. The combination of the drawing and the writing together is really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's when I teach these workshops, I have a really basic workshop, which is about 1 hour long, just called the Sketchnote Workshop. I've taught it hundreds of times now. I can almost teach it in my sleep at this point. And the thing that I love about that workshop is that it introduces people to those ideas. Like it's number one, I tell who I am. I talk about how did I come to sketchnoting and how it changed my life. I show samples of the work that I do so they have a sense of like, what this is, and I describe it. And then I have them draw along with me. So I think it's really critical that not only am I talking about it, but I'm teaching and they're following. So like this, almost a copying, they'll copy whatever I draw and right in my presentation, so that they feel like they're walking along the path, and they're seeing like, hey, I can draw this, right? I break it down into the simple shapes of square, circle, triangle, line, and dot. And when they rethink of drawing just using those simple shapes, it becomes much easier, more approachable, so that they can follow along and feel. I think the most exciting thing is when they walk in the door, they feel I can't draw, but when they leave, they feel I can draw with this simple method. They leave with some confidence and the ability to move forward, feeling that they can make visual images. Whether it's perfect or not is besides the point.
Yeah, I think I remember these things from back then that I thought, well, yes, I can draw
Yeah.
squares. And
it's kind of crazy. Like, so after doing this for hundreds of times, I've seen it so often that it seems like it's a truism. Like I don't have scientific information other than after drawing with people a long time, it just seems to keep working. So I keep doing it. And even little children. So an interesting side story is I was teaching this in a small college. I happened to be there for vacation, and I was invited to teach to a small group of adults. And my wife and at the time, I think he was 7 years old, my 7-year-old son, Landon, came along with, and he was just in the corner of the room. And so I taught this workshop to this small group of adults. And it turned out that Landon was very fascinated in drawing too. So he got a pen and he got some paper. And I didn't know this, but as I was teaching, he was following along and doing all the drawing that the adults were doing. And at the end, he came up and said, Daddy, look, I did all the drawings. And he had done everything that I drew in my presentation for that hour workshop. And I was really surprised and encouraged, because it sort of proved to me that if a 7-year-old is able to follow along and do this simply, then that says that I'm keeping it at a basic enough level that someone who's really fearful, or they've got maybe lots of baggage about drawing in their past, that they would be comfortable trying. If a 7-year-old can do it, then anybody can really do it, barring, if you are visually impaired or something like with a limitation where it's difficult in any case to draw or write, whatever.
mm-hmm.
So that was very encouraging that my little son could do it. And it gave me some inspiration that this was still the right path to follow.
Mm-hmm.
So that is on the most basic end of the workshop when I teach those. But I sort of think when I do the work that I do, I think of it almost on, I would say, a continuum or a scale or a spectrum, something like this. So on the basic end, there's like, I do free YouTube videos where I teach that workshop. I teach in all these events, like in my at my company or at different companies or schools, these basics, the 1-hour basics that I mentioned. So that's sort of like the free low end. I do lots of articles. I appear on podcasts. I often will talk at events, and maybe I won't even charge for that because I believe in the organization, right? As a way to say, like, there needs to be a lot of giving so that people can see, like, this is thing for me, like, what's it about? And it sort of gives an entry point. So that would be on the one end, the left end, or the one edge of the spectrum. Mm-hmm. And then at the high end of the spectrum would be maybe a one-on-one coaching, which I do occasionally. It's not something I regularly do, but having like one-on-one coaching at the other end, or maybe, coming to speak at an event for a company where it's, they fly me in and they put me in a hotel and I spend a day with their people and we work through the same basic drawing stuff. But then I hear from them, like, here's our challenges, our specific challenges in our context, and how we need to use drawing. How can you help us, Mike? So it might be, hey, let's build an icon library, or let's solve this specific problem. Maybe like, how do we in a school environment, how do we integrate sketchnoting into our curriculum? And I'll work with the teachers and the staff to do that. So that would be at the high end where, it's expensive to fly me there and have a hotel and spend a day, right? There's a cost there, but it's really one-on-one intensive, like I'm right there answering questions to a small group of people. And then somewhere in the middle is sort of like the sketchnote online sketchnote workshops that I started in the pandemic with the lettering workshop, and then followed up with a layout workshop and then an icon workshop, where it's like 2 hours. It's pretty intensive. It's mostly me teaching and sharing my thinking out loud, and then recording that and offering that as for sale for people after who aren't there in the live event. Mm-hmm. That's somewhere in the middle space. Mm-hmm. And I've been wondering lately, is there anything I can do in between the 2 hour intensive stuff and the one-on-one coaching? Is there another space there that I'm not thinking about?
It depends on what you want.
Yeah.
What your goal is with the whole sketchnoting. Is it right? Do you want to? I mean, what I wrote here is that, because that's my the sketchnote grandmaster. I think
thank you.
You even invented the term, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yes.
Yeah. So
coined the term. Yeah.
And I don't know if you want to make more money with it, or if you just want to evangelize and spread the news. Or
well, it certainly helps to make money at it, because it does take effort to do the work, to do all the preparation. I'm a very detail-oriented person. When I do the workshops, I spend a lot of time preparing them, whether it's in person for those like in an event, or even the online one. So, but I also believe in not everything needs to cost money, and also evangelization. So, I love it when other people teach sketchnoting. If I see them doing teaching, I encourage it, because I know that they're going to have a different perspective than me. Their way of teaching is different, and maybe not everybody, sees my way of teaching. It doesn't work for them. Maybe they need somebody else, right? So, in the long run, I just really want, if I were to say my overarching goal is, I feel like there's so many people who could draw and they don't because they're afraid. And if I can help people who are afraid of drawing start to draw to whatever degree is for them, whether it's just a little bit here and there, or they really take to it and it changes their life, like that's really my ultimate goal, is to do that, to help facilitate people drawing to the degree that helps them communicate better or think better.
What kind of people are you working with, or do you want to work with? I mean,
I think mainly
here I drew myself, by the way, back then.
Yeah, I figured that was probably you. Yeah. I would say that I think I enjoy working with adults. I enjoy working with kids too, but I honestly have not worked with kids much. It's not that I don't want to, it's just the opportunities haven't been there, and I also haven't really pursued them. I kind of feel like there's a lot of adults who are really little children inside, who, for whatever reasons, stopped drawing when they were little. And there's this huge untapped group of people who could have that drawing stuff turned on for them, that don't even think about it until they encounter this idea. And this is like an entry point for them to do drawing, whatever that means to them. So again, can
we maybe depict those, because I'm one of those who wanted to draw and didn't know and thought I wasn't good enough because it wasn't art. But I would also like to find out, who is this guy who doesn't even think about drawing? What is his problem?
Well, I think, some of the challenges, and you can maybe identify with this because you're maybe have some of these similar situations, is maybe in the past there was a trauma, like the teacher yelled at him for drawing and so he stopped, or somebody else was better at drawing than him, so why should I draw if that other person is better? Or maybe it just wasn't cool, like in middle school, drawing wasn't cool, so he stopped. And this can be, a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. And, even in the case of an educator, like the educator, maybe the student shouldn't be drawing because it was just they were doing it to avoid work. So, maybe even the teacher was justified in saying, stop that drawing, right? But the way the student thought was, well, I'm never drawing again, right? I don't know what those histories are. There's so many different reasons. And it would be fascinating to maybe do research with people and say, why did you stop drawing, and have them, think about it. So there's probably all different reasons why someone might stop, right?
But but it's always people who have drawn in the past, or what?
I think so. I think when I look at children, every child seems to draw. And then there's a point when they're, I don't know, like a teenager, where they sort of many stop. There's a few that continue. Maybe those are the ones like me, or those who end up in art school or become industrial designers or architects or something, right? They make use of it. But the interesting thing there too is that even people who draw professionally, like graphic designers and illustrators, have also found sketchnoting valuable because it sort of made them think about drawing in a different way. Maybe that's a separate person completely. So if we focus just on somebody, so I think about this is somebody who's a professional, or maybe they're a mom, right? Somebody who's an adult. They have skills and abilities, but they have not figured out a way that visual thinking and drawing fit into their lives. And I think if asked, they would like to, but they just don't know how to even begin or start, and they feel stuck. So that would be maybe the start of a customer.
Yeah.
That if I think of it in terms of a customer, a student, maybe student is a better way to frame that.
So now let's take this designer who is working on the computer, and he doesn't even think about drawing. He doesn't even know that this would be a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And he only remembers his love for drawing when he sees your stuff, when he posts your articles.
It might be someone who appreciates art, like they love comics, let's say, and they read comics when they were a kid. And maybe even like comic books are, that's for kids stuff, right? They don't even think about comics, right? Or they might see stuff and think it's cool, but think, I could never do that stuff. That's, that you need to be skilled. So there's sort of this idea that anything visual is art, and you have to have spent 20 years doing that and learning how to do it.
Yeah. So this year, all these people who told them to stop,
sort of in the past.
So
at some point,
these should be, or are, I guess, the enemy, everybody's enemy.
I guess so. I mean, I think about like probably maybe the bully would be an enemy, the teacher. Like I said, maybe the teacher was rightful. Maybe this, as a student, they were like being distracted. So, the thing I talk about with
what I think is that it's the whole school system which is setting up that drawing is art.
Yeah. And I think, I've heard people talk a little bit about, there's also a switch somewhere when kids start to learn how to write, that there's lots of emphasis on writing and devaluation of drawing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if you think about schools as a preparation for industrial people to work in an industrial capitalist system, like what do we need? Well, we need, like Seth Godin talks a lot about this. School is all about, following directions, knowing the rules and following the rules, right? There's all this emphasis. So the switch from drawing to writing is probably for efficiency to some degree. And then that's just the system that we use, because we use typewriters and eventually computers and, texting and like ChatGPT, and again, a text-based tool, right? Like these are the tools that we use. And so you need to conform to the way the system works. So a lot of it is being conformed to the way business gets done. And there's really not a place for visualization unless you become a graphic designer or maybe an architect, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even like architects,
even then he's not really fulfilled, because he still thinks he can't draw.
Yeah, and I guess so I think about this professional who, has expertise in some way and doesn't think about drawing. So there's two ways that drawing could express itself in his life or her life. One would simply be as a hobby, something to do because it's fun. Like I go on holiday or vacation and I do a drawing of my experiences because it's fun to do and it's relaxing and it's meditative. So that would be one level, is like a hobby level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's where it begins. Because even, if you haven't done it to this point, you probably can't imagine like, how does this fit into my professional life?
Mm.
But if we begin with a hobby, like I do it because I like watching TED Talks and I do sketch notes to remember that information, at some point there might be a realization by this person that, hey, I'm doing this as a hobby. Would this be valuable in a business? And I've heard this story over and over again. It's this transfer of the same skills in a business setting.
Mm.
And it might be small things like there's someone I just talked to a little while ago where they hand draw their PowerPoint presentations and they've received really great feedback because so much of our world is perfect and computerized that the hand drawn really grabs your attention and makes people pay attention. Or,
yes,
you think about the work that you're doing right now or the work that I've done maybe on a whiteboard, like doing professionally, drawing out our thinking with a small group of people has real value, because often if you just talk about it verbally or you write it and you don't see it, you can often believe that you agree on things when actually there's nuanced differences between what you believe, which I think I've heard the term called illusion of agreement. So you think you agree, but when you draw it, you can see like, oh, wow, like I'm not thinking that at all, Mike. Here's what I'm thinking, right? And it opens this discussion about what are we really thinking, both verbally and visually, because those two channels are slightly different. So maybe like the next step would be, in transferring it to the business, would be working on a whiteboard or sitting with a colleague or a report and drawing ideas out and showing it to them so that there's this agreement between the two parties, right? That could be an application that someone would use it for. And from there, it can go any place, right? Like, I think, again, going back to one of the first statements I had was this idea that keeping it as principles and concepts really benefited me. And I didn't realize at the time, that's just the way I thought of it. I thought of it conceptually, was it actually opens up the possibility for people to adapt it to their situation. Because by not being so restrictive about what it has to or not be, it means that someone like a physicist can adapt it to their situation, or a school teacher can adapt it to their situation and sort of take those concepts and apply them. Because I couldn't, when I did this and I thought about it as concepts, there's no way I could know every person's situation and what it would be valuable for. So by keeping it conceptual, it means that it's adaptable, right? I think that was really important. I sort of did it because it just made sense, and at the time that was the most logical way to do it. But it turned out to be a real benefit because it made it open, it made it adaptable. Trying to think if we're talking about this person. So what's interesting is if I can reach them at an early stage where they do it as a hobby, then they bring it into their profession. That is maybe the ideal student, because they are passionate about doing it. They see a value personally and professionally, and they're willing to invest in themselves by doing training. Like if those foundational elements aren't there, you're not going to get someone who's going to pay for a workshop, whether online or in person, right? It's not important enough for them to spend the money. Like I do the same calculation, right? Like when I buy software, if I use software every day and it's really useful, I'm willing to pay for it because I can see the value in that software. But if I don't, then I'm not going to pay for it, right? Like it's a pretty simple thing. So I have to somehow either find people that are already there or lead them to that place where they become someone who's interested, not only willing, but passionate about doing work with me, right? And even like Kevin Kelly, there's this guy named Kevin Kelly that wrote something years ago called 1,000 True Fans. And his contention is if you have 1,000 true fans, they can support you in the work that you're doing. And where you want to get to is that your stuff is so well regarded that anything you produce, people will buy it, because they, like, I have certain musical artists that whatever they produce, I just buy the album because I like them. I like their principles and the way they approach things and the quality and the way they, I trust them to give me a good experience. So it's not even a decision. Like, as soon as they release an album, I will buy it on vinyl, so I have a copy of it, because I just trust them, right? That's the place that I would love to be, is so trusted that whatever I produce, they would trust me and purchase it and be part of it, right? Or they would be more likely to trust me. And so all the work that I've been doing about evangelization and sharing is to build trust and to say, I'm on your side and I'm here to help you. And that's where my heart is. And hopefully that translates into, an interest by those people to say, yeah, Mike, we believe you. We think that you do have our best at heart, and we're willing to spend money. And that's been true. I've sensed that that's been true in the work that I've done to this point.
So far we have the artist who thinks she's not good enough.
Yeah.
The professional whose life is just a little bit too boring. Maybe. I don't know if I got that right.
I think so. And
it's also me.
Yeah, I think, and like, everybody's so different. Like, maybe some of these people are a lot like me. Like, they made it through school not being scolded or not having bullied doing drawing, but maybe at some point in their profession, it just wasn't required. So it's like any muscle that you don't exercise, it just gets weaker. It's not that they intended to or they didn't like it. It's just that, now I'm a professional, but I've always, I've heard this story many times too, where, when I was younger, I used to draw all the time. I loved comic books. But when I got to be a professional, that was just, it wasn't even that it was bad. It was just not, I had to spend my focus in a different area. And so those things just lost my focus. Right. So there might be actually a history of drawing that they would love to resurrect, but they just don't know how to begin. I think a lot of that is just like, how do I start? I'm stuck. How can you help me get unstuck? Right. That's sort of the people I'm looking for, are the stuck people. And hopefully by my teaching style, I can help them start to get unstuck. And once they get momentum, then it's really facilitating and helping them improve. So there's like probably the hardest thing is getting people started, like a big diesel engine, right? Like getting all that weight moving in one direction takes a lot of energy. But once the engine gets rolling, it's a lot easier to keep it moving, right? You get the mass moving in a certain direction, then it's really in proportion a lot less energy to keep it moving forward.
So it's people who haven't drawn since childhood.
Very often, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, something else to be said, I just thought of around not drawing since childhood. What if you're a director in a company or a CEO or some elevated position, but you draw like you're 10 years old because you haven't, right? There's a little bit of embarrassment around your ability to draw that might stop you also from drawing, right? That could be part of it. Yeah. Even if you drew when you were younger, like thinking you're not, a lot of it is mental. It's thinking you're not good enough for whatever different reason stops people. And so a lot of what I try to encourage them is have grace for yourself and think of it as an experiment and not a test, right? We're not testing you to see if you're good enough. We're simply offering you an opportunity to experiment and explore and try in a safe place so that you can get past that feeling like, am I going to look like an idiot because I draw like a 10-year-old and yet I'm a CEO of a company, right?
It is an experiment, not a test. This is great.
Yeah. Something else that came to mind as I'm talking through this is, I just lost it. Oh, the time requirement. So someone might be very open to the idea, like they used to draw as a kid, they love comic books. Maybe they just lost the plot as they became a professional because they didn't have the time. And they realized, like, I would love to do it, but do I really want to spend the time and the practice needed to do this work? And what I'll tie this to is lately I've been experimenting with sourdough bread making of all things. And I kind of like it because it forces me to be a beginner again. So I don't know if you've heard the term beginner's mind. So
Yeah.
this concept of beginner's mind, and it's this idea that you do something you have no experience with and you're not good at so that you can learn how to learn, right? So in my sourdough bread experience or journey, I started with a YouTube video and learned how to make the starter. And then once I achieved that, then I went to the same teacher who I like, and he had a sourdough, really simple sourdough recipe that I could do without much tending. And that turned out really great. Now, it wasn't perfect, and I certainly could have improved it. And I have. I think I've made 15 or 16 loaves of sourdough bread in the last 3 weeks. So I've just been constantly doing it over and over and over until I feel like, okay, I have a sense of how this works. And I want to get to the principles, like what's happening, like what are the nuances that I can learn. So, but it takes time, right? Like every time you make a loaf of bread, it's, I'm not constantly tending it, but the night before I have to remember to feed the starter. In the morning, I have to get up early enough to get the starter and mix the dough. And then I have to leave it sit for 2 hours and remember at 2 hours, I have to go do a little stretch and put it back. And then I have to leave it for 5 hours to ferment. At 5 hours, then I need to put it in the basket, right? And then I have to, about an hour and a half in, I have to go and do the touch on the dough to make sure that it is, ready for baking.
Mm-hmm.
And then to time, like, okay, when it's getting close, got to turn the oven on. Like, it's not that it's a lot of time if you total it up. It might be a total of like an hour if I total all the little actions. But like over the course of a day, I have to be aware of it and I have to make it a part of my day. And the same thing for sketchnoting. It's like investing the time to learn like how to do it and what's the process and the principles, and then to apply it, which means remembering to integrate it.
Yeah.
So that's something I think,
can we talk a little bit about what do they get out of it, even if they don't have this tangible thing, like now they're making money with it or something like that?
Right. Yeah, I think that's really important because I think most people probably won't make money with it, which is maybe a good level set, right? Like, hey, look, this is not about making money. No, I think it's more about being a good communicator and thinking process. I would say the core of it, I would say the most valuable thing for someone is it makes me a better thinker, right? If you're a good writer or you can type and write, that's one aspect of thinking, right? To think that way.
Okay, wait a second. Moving over.
Okay.
And
this is really fun, by the way. This is really enjoyable. It's fun to have somebody drawing for me.
I can imagine.
I'm usually on the other side of this. This is really fun.
Yeah. It's the first time that I'm drawing for a professional.
Yeah, this is great. You're making me want to do it for other people now.
Yeah. So, and now my computer's acting up.
Oh, no. It's a lot of load on it to do a video and do the drawing together.
Maybe. So now he's drawing. And
yep. So you were kind of getting at what's the value to this person now that he's achieved what he wants, right?
Yeah.
So I say the number one value, I think, and it would be interesting to verify this with someone who's been a student of mine, is that they think more deeply and in a different way than before. So coming back to like everyone learns how to write and to think in words. But if you expand your thinking to visual thinking, like spatially, how does that change your thinking process? It gives you more depth of thinking. Maybe you think about things not so linearly, like you can think in multiple directions, right? Like what you're drawing there, right? So you're not so limited to this, first I do this, then I do this, then I do this, which is valuable, like a process. But like, how can you think about going sideways and going up and down in multiple directions, right? Spatial thinking, it gives you that.
I have to pause for a second and
sure. Save.
And save.
I know that feeling. Am I doing okay, by the way, Ingrid?
Are you doing okay?
Yeah. I just feel like I'm rambling.
You're
which is probably
perfect.
good. You're making me think
Perfect.
about things.
It's perfect and lots of material. It's great.
Good. It's fun to watch you work.
Okay, here we are. And yeah, now everything is back to normal. He is now thinking spatially, and this is also for me like the most important part of the whole thing. I mean, that it's fun illustrations is one
Yeah,
thing,
what's the end point? Yeah.
but
I'm a better thinker. Yeah.
what it's for me is that I mean, maybe you noticed that I'm sorting all the information into these
Yeah.
buckets here. So this is the before, and this is the medium, the
Process. Yeah.
how you get them from A to B,
Yeah.
and this is the endpoint. So without this spatial thinking, I couldn't. So
Yeah.
I'm a better thinking spatial.
So you're a better
And this is
thinker. I think you're also a better communicator because you're thinking about it in more than words. So communication, I think, improves. That's a valuable skill.
so they can show their drawing.
Show the thinking in a way. I mean, it's a drawing is the medium, but the ultimate goal is what you're thinking about. And that brings me to an interesting. I have a lawyer friend who's not a lawyer anymore, but when he was a lawyer, he used to go to like hearings with a judge and a competing lawyer, and he used to sketchnote what he was going to talk about on a single sheet, and he had it all laid out because he knew how like these hearings were predictable, right? You knew what was going to happen in what order. You kind of knew what the judge was going to ask, and so he would lay it out in a logical way that he understood, and then answer all the questions or have all the information that he knew he would be asked, and then had all the questions he wanted to ask with space to do little drawings in there. And he would say like, well, my drawing was terrible, but it was so effective. Like I used it for years and years. And I think he even said like other lawyers would make fun of him, like, oh, what are you doing with your little drawings? And then he would beat them. And then they weren't laughing so much, right? But it basically was a way to think about the information visually and lay it out in a structured way. And then he just had a template. Every time he would do a hearing like that, he had a template ready to go. And he would just fill in the information and in one single sheet of paper. He could present his thinking. He could show it to someone else, but it was really a reference for himself to be able to clearly communicate. I would think the better communication also would fall under presentation. So I've heard from pastors or other presenters who like to lay out their talk in this visual way, so that if it's on a sheet and they have maybe they're linking connected information in this visual way, it gives them the freedom, if they're more of a extemporaneous speaker, to be able to look and see, well, and by the way, this is related to that, and you could answer questions because you're visually seeing what's the content I want to present in this sort of visual way. So I've heard that it being used in that way too.
Yeah, and then let's not forget this one here, who found the courage to express herself.
Yeah, bring her over. Got to make her happy now. I see this a little bit. So I think about, there's someone I can think of is Diana Soriat, who is like a German housewife, friend of mine. She's actually Austrian, lives in Germany.
Yeah.
She's a very influential person, really great. And she uses not only sketchnoting, but she integrates it into bullet journaling, which is great. And she's become such a confident person in the way that she expresses herself. It's really fun to see all she's doing. And I think what's cool about it, and this is why, again, I encourage all kinds of people to teach this, is because, Diana is going to reach maybe women better than I can. German's clearly better than I can because I can't speak German, right? So it transcends the borders of language and the kind of people that you are, right? Like, so by enabling all these other teachers, it means that the concepts will be presented by people that are like other people or who have different perspective, which I think is valuable. It just strengthens the community. So I guess maybe one aspect that comes from talking about this is being part of a community could be valuable for either of these people. The last thing, which I think might have been lost in the drop off, is both he and she, or both people. A third benefit besides being confident is community. So you become part of a community now of other like-minded people who can help you even get better and who can share and give you ideas and give you a sense of purpose because they're your friends, right? I have so many friends that I've made by being in this community that make it that is almost like a magnetism to doing the work, is because I know my friends are doing the work and I want to see them and see what they're doing and help them. So that maybe is a less like, I think it's a desire by people to be part of a community, but maybe as in the beginning, they don't really think about, hey, this will make me part of a community. But at some point, if they stay with it and invest the time in it, it's actually a really huge benefit. And I've heard so many encouraging stories of people who say their lives have changed and they've made so many friends in this community that's another value that's harder to, can't put a number on that, but it's certainly valuable.
Mm-hmm. So how could we put that stuck here? They are stuck in, I mean, that's always a part of my thing to try to extract a message.
Right. How do we move from here to there?
Yeah, stuck in maybe wrong or professionalism or in misunderstood, stuck somewhere. Where are they stuck?
I think a lot of it comes down to fear, stuck in fear. They're afraid of being shown that they're a bad drawer. They're afraid that they don't draw good enough. They're afraid that they're going to get started and they won't be able to finish. There's lots of fear, I think, underneath a lot of it, I would say.
Yeah, maybe also something like standards. They think they're not stuck in societal
quality
standards for art.
Right. Or you might stick out or be strange, right? Like for a lot of people, that's a real concern, is to be willing to be different, is they're afraid because they want to be just like everyone else.
And this childish. For me, it was
childish. Yeah. It's best depending on, what culture you're in or what profession you're in, all these things.
I thought as a professional, I couldn't show that I can draw. And now I'm showing it.
So that's like the other side of the coin, right? There's one side that says, oh, I can't show that I draw because I'm a terrible drawer. But if you're a good drawer, you might think, well, no one will understand it or accept it, right? So that's a different kind of fear around the same concept.
And I think you always have to embrace the imperfectionism. That's my big thing.
Yeah. I'd be okay with it.
Yeah. So now they have the freedom to grow, actually. I mean, I'm thinking about the sourdough.
Grow and be yourself, right? Because I think that's a lot of, fear too, is if everybody knew who I really was, would they still love me, right? That's kind of a fear sometimes too. And then you find out that, well, turns out there's a lot of people that are like me, and that fear was unfounded. But you don't, when you're fearful, it's hard to get past that. So.
Okay, so now we have the before and we have the after, and everybody's happy in the end. And how do you best get them from
one place to the other?
I mean, you already have that here.
I have some elements, yeah. The sketchnote workshop, I think, is big. I think doing the free one on YouTube.
What do I if now somebody sees that and they say, I'm exactly this person or this person, how would they go about? Should they first take the sketchnote workshop on your website, or what is the first step?
Yeah, I think probably if they don't want to invest any money into it, they're not sure, I would say the sketchnote workshop, which I have a free YouTube video, would be the starting place.
Okay, sketchnote workshop on YouTube.
Yeah, so there's a YouTube version that I recorded years ago, and it's probably one of the most popular of my YouTube videos, but it's free, and it shares the concepts, and you can take it without any cost. So that's a great entry point. And maybe you learned about that because I was in a podcast, or you might have seen me someplace, right? So how you get to that can vary.
Mm.
And then maybe at that point you would say, well, I'm really interested in this. I want to go deeper. What can I do? Well, then I would say the next thing would be probably buy my sketchnote handbook, the very first book, so
Mm-hmm.
that you can, then you become more of a student. You're studying the book, you're practicing the concepts, you can see samples, right?
Yeah. Trying to draw a book here.
Oh, you can just draw the black stripes across the middle. That's pretty. Anyway,
Sketchnote handbook is called, right?
yeah. It's pretty well known for there's a black stripe horizontally across the middle with 3 circles inside. So that would be, I think the next step would be getting the book and then practicing. And then you might, if you're fascinated, you're probably starting to see people's work on, say, Instagram or Pinterest or something, Facebook or something. So that might lead you to social media and communities.
Mm-hmm.
And then that might lead you to me specifically and say, oh, Mike, I'm a fan of Mike now because I read his book and I see him posting, and now I'm going to buy one of his live courses or whatever the thing is that I'm offering, right? Which is sort of the question, like, do I keep making these 2-hour workshops, or do I go in a different direction and make it more interactive and maybe it's a little more time intensive? And again, that could be, I could still do the other things and still do the new thing, right?
Yeah.
So my big question is there a space between the 2-hour Zoom workshop that I have been doing and the live in person, super intensive one-on-one with 10 to 15 people? Is there something in between that? Is there an online thing that I can do with Zoom that's over a longer period of time, which has a community built into it, which has interactivity built into it? And the reason I would say that space there is I can reach people all over the world without having to fly to their place, and I can do it from right here in my office and yet have a great community experience. And then the live class in person would be like the super high end thing. Like, I'm going to go to Leiden and I'll be there probably teaching something, right? That would be like an in-person event, but those are fewer and farther between and more costly, right? So how can I do
I
a
somehow
live?
missed that. I should have gone there. I didn't. Yeah, no, it's too late.
They sold out really quickly, so
Yeah.
they only had 120 spots. So I think because it sold quickly, I think that might have been part of the reason some people missed, which is unfortunate, but that's just because of the venue they had. There's no reason you can't just show up in Leiden and we can have a coffee, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it would be a trip from Denmark, but
Yeah.
yeah.
There was an interesting thing in Denmark also with what's her name? Calvi,
Oh, really? Okay, cool.
but I also missed it.
Hmm.
Oh, I was so busy.
Yeah.
Okay, live classes online.
Yeah, and I think you could say live classes in person and online slash in
Right.
person. It could be
Yeah,
both,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Now that the pandemic is kind of faded a little bit, it's a little bit easier to be in person someplace. I mean, the challenge for me is I'm a dad with a wife and kids. Like, I can't travel all that much, so I'd have to be very specific about it. So that's where the online becomes great because I can just dedicate a Saturday and I can reach, 20 different countries in a couple of Saturdays or one Saturday
Mm.
to teach, right? So I think the missing part really is the online live class where it's a little bit more intensive, which probably would mean instead of 100 people, maybe it's more like 20, right? So it's
Mhm.
manageable to do that, to really give the one-on-one attention that 20 people would want,
Mhm.
where I could be active in a private Slack channel. I could be answering questions, like all that kind of stuff. Just
Mhm.
be a different expression of the concept. And maybe the content itself would be modified for that purpose too. I don't know.
I mean, there's no reason not to try it out.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so easy.
Yeah. I mean, the online training I've done so far has all been experimental. When the pandemic hit, I started accepting every opportunity to be on to teach. So, and then that got me comfortable teaching on Zoom. And once I felt pretty comfortable by that fall, then I just said, hey, what if I teach this live workshop? So I did. And I think we had over 200 students. Now, I think looking back on it, of course, part of the reason that it worked well is because there was nothing else to do. Everybody was trapped in their house, right? So there was an advantage to doing this in that way. And since then, it's a little different, right? There are certainly repeat people who do the workshops, but it's much fewer, I think, because there's a lot more opportunities. There's many other things you can spend your money on. And, you know, so it's on me to make sure that I provide a good value so that when people do this, they come out with good skills that they can apply that same day. Yes. So hopefully that's what I'm doing. I feel like I'm doing that. Would be interesting as a user experience designer. One of the keys to the work we do is talk to the users and find out what they're actually thinking, right? Just don't assume.
Yeah.
So that's something that maybe I could do some like one-on-one, like half an hour phone calls with repeat customers and say, what do you like about what I've done? If I could do something new, what would it be? And I could sort of fill in the gaps for what that looks like, what that in-between thing looks like.
Exactly. So, yes. Customer conversations.
Oh yeah, so important. It's pretty cool.
A little bit of shadow goes a long way.
Yeah, I like it. I really like that color too. That choice of color is really nice. Sort of a slate blue almost, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I also decided to simplify my life and not use a lot of colors because
I'm a 2-color person as well. If I do paper, I like to have 2 colors, black and then a highlight of some kind.
And
blue or orange.
I also use red, but that is something that I will probably add later.
Okay.
So this is your storyboard here.
Wow, this is great. This is really fun. I've enjoyed this process.
Good.
You've helped me. Now I can go on my book and I can check off thinking about my next workshop because I just did it with Ingrid.
Yeah.
There it is, checked off.
I wonder why you didn't do that yet.
I think maybe it's just constraints, and I think, having done 3 of these now, I just feel like it's time for a reinvention.
Yeah.
So how do I take the components of the thing that's worked and make it a new thing and add new things that work better? Because I think now that everybody's online all the time, the expectations are increasing for like what this should be or how it should work or what it should be like, right? So I'm just at that point. It's been 3 years and it's about time to kind of reinvent.
But I'm not even sure that it's just also a matter of how you position it and how you sell it. I mean, it doesn't work without selling, although you're well known in the space and you would think that it sells itself, but I don't know.
It takes work. It's definitely a lot of marketing is definitely an effort. Figuring out pricing is an effort, like trying to find what is a decent, like what will somebody be willing to pay?
Yes.
That's, feels like, it's important, but I'm not breaking the bank either. So that walking that line is tough. But that's part of the job.
Yeah. Okay, so let's finish this here and I'll put a little more finishing touches on it.
Okay, great.
And I'll send it.
It's wonderful. This is really fun. Thanks for inviting me to be part of the process. I've enjoyed it.
I did too.